Hello, welcome. I'm going to start out today by talking about an interesting experiment I found on the internet that clearly illustrates how different people think about the same thing in different ways. And that experiment is about toast. We wanted to bring this experiment back to GPS Insight because what we wanted to understand is if you take a simple idea like toast and you see how many different perspectives there can be about this one idea, what happens when that idea is more complex? What happens when that idea is something like our portal, our product? So we provided all the participants with a blank piece of paper and a Sharpie, and we asked them to draw the step-by-step process of making toast. As you can imagine, the vast majority of our results came out looking something like this. You've got a loaf of bread, you use a knife to slice it up, put it in the toaster, wait some time, bingo, you've got toast. But we had some results that were much further afield. We had some drawings that looked like this, where you have to get a job and work 5 days a week before you can make toast. We had people talking about how Angry Birds can be beneficial in the making of toast. And we had a lot of discussion about what should or should not be used when you're making toast, or eaten with toast, pardon me. This next one is my favorite. It's my coworker's interpretation of what his kindergartner thinks it is to make toast. So I know what you're thinking. What does this experiment with toast have to do with telematics? And this experiment clearly demonstrates one of the biggest challenges faced as a product manager and also one of the biggest challenges faced by businesses. And that is, how do you bring value to all of your customers when they have such unique perspectives and such unique needs? And our philosophy at GPS Insight is that we try to improve the customer experience. And so we listen to you guys for feedback and use that feedback in order to direct our roadmap, to make changes to the roadmap as we go, and then also to make changes to our individual features and products. Some of the feedback we get from you is really clear and concise, and we can use this as a data point when we're trying to gather what our next direction will be. Some of the feedback is great because we like hearing good things. That's always fun to hear. And some of it is just downright silly. But we read it all. And we get this feedback from several different places. We get it when we talk to you directly at customer roadshows. Some of you guys might have met me at a customer roadshow. We also hear from you guys at conferences, and then we have platforms in our portal and our mobile apps for you guys to send feedback directly. We also listen to what our internal customers are telling us. So our account managers who really work with you guys on a regular basis to understand how you get the most ROI out of our product. We talk to our sales representatives who understand the why of your business, and our support reps who keep you up and running day to day. So why do we want so much feedback? And this is because we need to find the signal in the noise. We're looking for a common thread amongst all of our customers. And so if we stick with one market segment, the data doesn't make as much sense. What do I mean by this in practice? Imagine, if you will, I were to talk to a room full of plumbing companies, and I were to ask them how GPS Insight could help them better serve their own customers. And they might tell me that they need information about the location of their vehicles, about routing, about attribution. And when we say attribution, we're associating attributes to vehicles. So maybe this vehicle has a set of tools for fixing sinks, and this vehicle has a set of tools for fixing hot water heaters. And then also they'll want information about drivers. And this is a really precise picture of what plumbers want. But it's not accurate when we're talking about our entire customer base. So when you step back and you broaden this lens, what we begin to see is a picture that looks more like this. Now, this is a generalization of real data we have. And what this data is saying is that you want information about your drivers. So why is that? Well, the industry as a whole is talking a lot these days about safety and driver safety. So that's one piece. As you increase driver safety, you automatically get increased operational efficiency. Anytime you increase efficiency, of course, is followed by savings. And finally, there's this piece that we talk about some, and it's this community. And we talk about stickiness when we're talking about customer experience and why your customers decide to stick with you instead of moving to a different vendor. And community is a big piece of this. Because so many of the drivers live in the community where the business is formed, it's important to know that the driver safety is foremost in mind. On top of that, it's good to know that your drivers aren't speeding through school zones, that they're not knocking down mailboxes on their route. So this is why we're focusing these days as an industry on driver safety and driver data. So now we know the what. We know that you guys want driver data. We know the why for all those reasons we just went through. And then the next question, the remaining question, is the how. And that's kind of my role, talking about implementation. And what we concern ourselves with, what we ask ourselves, is how can we deliver this such that it's going to reach as broad of an audience as possible, and also so that we reach them as quickly as possible, so that people aren't left waiting. And these two ideas of reaching a broad audience and also reaching them quickly fall squarely into Agile development. This helps us answer that question for us. And so Agile is just a method of working. I know it's probably a new term for a lot of people. Maybe some of you have heard of it. It's very buzzwordy, and it's just a project management process. It's been around for a few decades. It has its roots in manufacturing and is very successful, which is why so many software companies have adopted it. Agile focuses on teamwork and collaboration. It focuses on a regular review of what's been done, on direct communication with customers and collaboration with customers, and the ability to change rapidly to change. And that's where the Agile piece comes from. We call it Agile because you can be Agile, you can turn when you need to. And Agile has 12 principles. You can go online and look up the Agile Manifesto and you'll see these 12 principles. Today we're going to focus on the 3 that we think will help you improve your own customer experience the most. And those 3 are to deliver early, often, and to welcome changing requirements. And when we talk about delivery, we're either talking about a delivery for, in our case, working software, or in your case, maybe services. So to understand Agile best, it helps to understand more traditional methods of project management. And one of these methods is called waterfall. That's what you see here. And with waterfall, they work in big chunks, and they deliver at the end, say, an entire loaf of bread, right? And there are problems with this, because at 20% complete, you have no value to give to your customers. 50% complete, still no value. Worse yet, as you go through this process, you don't have the opportunity to get feedback on how things are actually functioning. And so you can't make a change until the very end, and that's not a good time to make a change. In Agile, you work in slices. So you still hit every single one of these phases. However, when you're 10% complete, you can deliver either a product, like software, or a service, and you can get feedback from your customer if you're headed in the right direction. If you need to make changes, you can also iterate on what you've already delivered rather than having to go back to the beginning when you're working in waterfall. So, in practice, at GPS Insight, let's go back to talking about driver data and how we have implemented that here. So, I know it seems counterintuitive, but when we started working with driver data, we started with hardware, even though we're a software company. And so we work with CalAmp to get hardware, and when we heard about this increase in driver data information that people were wanting, we asked them if they had devices that we could use that could alert in cab. And we worked with them to get those set up. And one of the things we worked with was making a software page so that we could configure these devices. So now not only are they alerting in cab, however, we're making sure that if you have somebody driving a sedan, they're not scored on the same criteria as somebody who's driving a box truck. And so these were a couple slices of value that we were able to bring to customers immediately. Then we started working on reports. The first thing we did was we came out with reports for individual drivers. So maybe you have one for Lance, you have one for Ryan. But eventually we knew that you would need a report where you could look at all of your drivers in one page. And so we came out with a summary report so that you could look at your entire fleet of drivers. But we know, again, as fleet managers, that you need to step back and you need to take a look at the bigger picture. And so we put in our metrics the ability to look at this driver information. So you could look there to see your driver information alongside your utilization and alongside fuel usage, whatever other metrics are important to you. And so that's how we have used Agile development to bring forth one example of our work. On top of this, we understood that we were not only bringing this forward quickly, but we were reaching a broader customer base because we were able to get that feedback quickly. As any of you know who use our standard product, we don't support drivers in that product. And so what we were able to do is we were able to use the same information, only base it on vehicles. So if you had a 1-to-1 ratio, driver to vehicle, you could still see how your drivers were being graded, how they were scoring. Even if you didn't have that one-to-one ratio, you could still see your fleet as a whole, and you could say, gosh, we have a speeding problem, or we have an idling problem. And you could start to work with your drivers to correct this. So I know this sounds great for a software company, but it works for fleet as well. And the story that I'm about to tell you guys, I think will really resonate with some of you, because it's a common problem for growing businesses. So we have George the plumber. And when George started, he was the best in the area. He was the fastest at fixing pipes. All of his customers really loved him. And so of course his business grew, and he had to bring on more plumbers. And as he did this, he started to hear back from his customers saying that their estimated time of arrival was just not accurate. And we all know how difficult this can be. Somebody tells you a time window, you take time off work, somebody else has to get the kids from school. So his customers weren't happy. So he implemented a telematics solution so that he could look at data and better advise his customers when his plumbers were going to arrive for service calls. After that, he heard back from customers again, and they said, gosh, it sure is taking the new plumbers a really long time on any given service call. And so he looked at his telematics data once again, and he realized that that was because his plumbers were having to make multiple trips to Home Depot for any given service call. And it was because they didn't have the right tools or the right parts for the job. And so he started using attributes in his telematics solution so that he could determine which trucks had which tools and parts, so that he could accurately dispatch them. So finally, he heard back from his customers again, and they wanted validation of when stops were done, when service calls were done. And so they started using stop notes. You can see where we're going with this. So without realizing it, George the plumber was able to implement Agile development. And he was able to work in slices. He didn't try to deliver the whole loaf at once. He worked in small pieces, he delivered them to his customer, got feedback, and he implemented all of these expertly. And it kept his business in the forefront of the industry in that area. So we hope whether you're working with a software company, whether you're working as a plumber, anywhere else in fleet, that if you're able to implement these ideas of Agile development, it helps you bring the best possible service to your own customers so that they feel like they're getting a good customer experience and they appreciate the value that you bring to them. Thank you very much for your time.